The palace doors open as servants carry a golden robe and a crown into the hall, presenting them as wedding gifts from the wife the court has already pushed aside. The silk catches the torchlight, and the gold reflects a glow that suggests reconciliation. No one inside the palace understands that the fabric has been prepared to burn. In Corinth, marriage is a political contract, but in Colchis, oaths bind before gods. Medea does not ask for mercy. She defines justice through pharmakia. Whoever breaks a sacred vow will pay through his bloodline. The robe reaches Glauce's hands. The court watches with restrained relief, because this gesture appears to close a scandal that has lingered too long. A foreign wife accepts dismissal. A royal marriage proceeds. Order restores itself. Medea stands apart from the ceremony, silent and composed. She does not weep. She does not protest. She calculates distance, timing, and consequence. She understands that Corinth measures power through alliances and heirs, while Colchis measures power through oath and invocation. She belongs to both systems, and she trusts neither. The robe settles onto Glauce's shoulders. The crown touches her hair. For a brief moment, the palace witnesses beauty elevated into legitimacy. Then, the fabric tightens. Heat moves beneath the gold thread, as if the sun itself has been trapped inside it. Fire does not fall from the sky. Fire rises from the gift. Screams replace music. The bride claws at her skin as flame consumes silk, then flesh. Creon rushes forward to save his daughter, and he wraps his arms around her burning body. The fire spreads to him without hesitation. Authority does not shield him. Bloodline does not shield him. The palace floor becomes a lesson. This is not rage unleashed without thought. This is pharmakia executed with precision. Medea does not storm the throne room with weapons. She sends an object that performs her will. She turns ceremony into a battlefield and turns trust into ignition. Game rule. In a political marriage, the bride secures the future. Remove the bride, and the future collapses. Jason is not in control of this story. He believes that he is securing stability through remarriage. He believes that exile can be managed, and that a foreign wife can be discarded without consequence. He does not see that Medea has already redefined the terms. She does not attack his body. She attacks his continuity. But the fire in Corinth is only the opening move. What Medea chooses next will not merely wound Jason. It will erase him in the only language his world truly respects: legacy. Smoke climbs the palace columns and stains the carved stone above the doorway. The crowd gathers but does not intervene. Corinth understands spectacle, but it does not understand this kind of weapon. This fire does not behave like accident or riot. This fire obeys intention. Jason arrives too late to prevent the burning, and too early to deny what it means. He sees the body of Creon. He sees the body of the bride. He understands immediately that this is not chaos. This is reply. He accuses Medea of savagery. He accuses her of excess. He speaks the language of reason and moderation, as though politics justifies betrayal. He frames his remarriage as strategy, as protection for their children, as advancement within a system that rewards proximity to power. Medea answers with a different logic. She reminds him of the oath he swore when she left Colchis. She reminds him of the father. She defied the brother. She lost the homeland she abandoned. She does not raise her voice. She names costs. Game rule. If one partner sacrifices everything and the other reframes it as convenience, the debt does not disappear. The debt compounds. Corinth now sees her clearly, but only through fear. She is foreign. She commands forces that the city cannot regulate. She does not appeal to council or assembly. She acts. In a political order built on male lineage and negotiated alliances, Medea introduces a variable that cannot be absorbed. Yet the true fracture has not occurred. Glauce is dead. Creon is dead. The palace has burned. These losses wound Jason's ambition, but they do not end his line. His sons remain alive, and through them his name can still attach itself to future power. Medea knows this. She understands that as long as Jason's blood continues, he can recover. Reputation can be rebuilt. Alliances can be forged again. Memory can be softened with time. What she considers next will cross from vengeance into structural destruction. She will not attack his body. She will attack the only immortality he possesses. Night settles over Corinth, but the city does not sleep. The palace stands dark, its authority reduced to ash and rumor. Inside a separate chamber, Medea faces the decision that will define every version of her story that follows. She understands the structure of Jason's world. A man survives disgrace if his sons survive him. A lineage restores honor faster than apology. If the children live, Jason remains anchored to the future. If the children die, his name fractures. Medea does not act in frenzy. She calculates consequence against consequence. She measures her pain against permanence. She recognizes that once she crosses this threshold, no sanctuary in Greece will call her innocent. Game rule: destroy the heirs and you destroy the horizon. Some traditions debate the details, and later voices will contest the blame. What remains constant in the version shaped by Euripides is the choice. Medea chooses to strike where Jason cannot defend himself. She chooses to deny him continuity. The act itself recedes behind its impact. The children are removed from Jason's reach, and with them his political future collapses. Corinth witnesses something it cannot absorb into law or ritual. A mother has severed blood for strategy. The city does not know how to narrate that without turning her into a monster. Jason breaks not because he has lost a bride or a throne, but because he has lost succession. He appeals to the gods. He appeals to memory. He finds neither reversal nor remedy. Medea does not remain to argue. Helios, her grandfather, provides the chariot drawn by dragons, and she rises above the city that now fears her name. She leaves Jason on the ground alive, but emptied of legacy. Game rule: when oaths collapse, someone rewrites justice. In Corinth, justice burns, and a bloodline ends. The chariot does not descend back into Corinth. It carries Medea away from the city that has now fixed her image in terror. From above, she looks less like a fugitive and more like a force withdrawing after execution. Jason remains below, shouting into a sky that does not answer him. But this story did not begin in Corinth, and it does not end there. Before she became the woman who burned a palace and erased a lineage, Medea was the condition of a hero's survival. Long before Jason spoke the language of political necessity, he stood on foreign soil facing tasks designed to kill him. The mission for the Golden Fleece was never a test of courage alone. It was a calculation set by Pelias to remove a rival without drawing blood in public. Colchis stood at the edge of the Greek imagination, a land tied to ritual oath and the authority of gods who did not resemble Olympus. Aeëtes guarded the Golden Fleece, not as treasure but as legitimacy. The fleece anchored his rule. It symbolized divine sanction. Jason arrived with ambition and a ship full of names that later poets would celebrate. What he did not bring was a method to survive Aeëtes' trials. Strength would not carry him through fire-breathing bulls. Honor would not defeat warriors born from dragons' teeth. Courage would not lull a serpent that never slept. Medea watched him before she chose him. In some tellings, Hera and Aphrodite intervened, and Eros bent her will toward desire. Historians of myth debate how much of her love was divine compulsion and how much was agency. What remains certain is this: Medea possessed knowledge that made the impossible negotiable. She stood at a threshold between systems. Colchis trained her in pharmakeia, in ritual speech and herbs that could heal or destroy. Greece measured glory in visible conquest. Medea understood that victory often depends on what no one sees. Aeëtes did not intend to negotiate. He designed 3 trials as layered execution. First came the bulls, their hooves forged in bronze, their breath ignited with fire. No warrior could approach them without being burned alive. Jason prepared to meet them with shield and spear because that is how Greek heroes solved problems. Medea prepared differently. She compounded a salve from sacred herbs and bound it to invocation. She instructed Jason to anoint his body and weapons. The fire touched him and did not consume him. The bulls yielded not to strength, but to preparation. Second came the field sown with dragon's teeth. From the soil rose the Spartoi, armed and formed for slaughter. Jason faced an army that multiplied faster than he could strike. Medea did not answer with more force. She answered with misdirection. She told them to cast a stone into their ranks. Confusion spread. Each warrior. Third came the serpent that guarded the Golden Fleece, a creature that did not sleep and did not tire. No duel could defeat it. Medea approached with chant, and herb-weaving sound and scent into sedation. The serpent's coils loosened, its eyes dimmed. Jason lifted the fleece while the guardian lay stilled. Game rule. If the hero wins through unseen strategy, the strategist holds the real power. The ship Argo departed with triumph proclaimed in Jason's name. Songs would later credit his bravery. Few would center the woman who engineered each survival. In that silence, a pattern formed. Jason carried the symbol. Medea carried the method. The departure from Colchis did not conclude the crisis. It intensified it. Aeëtes understood betrayal immediately. The Golden Fleece was gone, and with it the emblem of his authority. He launched pursuit not as a grieving father alone, but as a king defending legitimacy. Ships cut across the sea behind Argo. Distance narrowed. Medea assessed the situation without illusion. Speed would not outpace a royal fleet. Negotiation would not restore trust. If Aeëtes caught them, Jason would die, and Medea would face punishment not only as traitor, but as desecrator of sacred order. Her brother Aeëtes became the fulcrum. In the most widespread version, Medea killed him and divided his body, casting the pieces into the sea. Aeëtes halted to gather the remains for burial rites. Piety interrupted pursuit. In another account, preserved in the Argonautica, Aeëtes was lured into an ambush in which Jason shared responsibility. That variation matters because later narratives would attempt to isolate the blood on Medea's hands. What does not change is the calculation. Medea chose to sever blood to secure escape. She understood that ritual obligation would bind her father more tightly than fury. Game rule. When strength cannot be defeated, bind it to its own rules. Argo survived because Aeëtes stopped. The crew sailed on. Victory carried a stain that could not be washed by distance. This was the point of no return. Medea was no longer simply a daughter in exile. She had crossed into a logic where kinship could be sacrificed to strategy. Jason benefited from that choice, yet the moral cost did not attach to his name with equal force. The sea widened behind them, but it did not dilute consequence. Every league traveled toward Greece increased the gap between Medea and any homeland that would claim her without suspicion. Return did not bring reward. Aeëtes did not welcome Jason as a sovereign restored. Pelias remained on the throne, and he had never intended to yield it. The quest for the Golden Fleece had been designed as removal by distance. Jason had survived, but survival alone did not dismantle power. Jason could not storm the palace. Pelias controlled guards, law, and narrative. A direct challenge would fail. Medea shifted the terrain. She began with demonstration. Before witnesses, she performed a ritual of renewal upon Aeson, Jason's aging father. She drained his weakened blood and replaced it with a preparation of potent herbs. The old man rose, restored his youth, returned through pharmakia. The spectacle established credibility. Power became visible. Then Medea targeted belief. She approached the daughters of Pelias with promise. She claimed that the same process could restore their father. She instructed them to dismember him and place the pieces into a prepared cauldron. They obeyed. Medea withheld the essential element. Pelias did not rise. Game rule. Convince the enemy to execute the act and you remove yourself from the blade. Pelias died not by open assault, but by filial hands guided through deception. Jason's rival was eliminated without siege. The consequence arrived swiftly. The city did not crown Jason. Instead, horror eclipsed gratitude. Medea's method destabilized trust at the core of household and throne. If daughters could be turned against a father, what boundary remained secure? Jason and Medea were expelled from Aeëtes. The throne passed elsewhere. Victory removed an enemy, but it did not secure a kingdom. Medea had protected her faction and fulfilled Jason's objective. In return, she gained exile. The pattern sharpened. Her strategies ensured survival and advancement, yet the political system absorbed the benefit while isolating the architect. Corinth offered stability, at least in appearance. Creon ruled a structured city where marriage reinforced alliance and lineage secured continuity. Jason adapted quickly. He presented himself not as a foreign adventurer, but as a man ready for integration. For a decade, Medea lived within that order. She bore children. She occupied a space that was tolerated but never fully embraced. She remained useful, yet foreign. Her past was known. Her methods were remembered. When Jason chose to marry Glauce, daughter of Creon, he framed the decision as advancement for everyone involved. He argued that proximity to the throne would protect his sons and elevate their status. He separated emotion from strategy. He treated marriage as instrument. Medea heard the calculation beneath the explanation. She recognized that her sacrifices were being rewritten as temporary assistance. Jason positioned himself as self-made, as though the Golden Fleece had fallen by his own capacity. The narrative shifted. Medea became inconvenience. Game rule. When power is consolidated through remarriage, the former alliance becomes expendable. Creon compounded the fracture by ordering Medea into exile. He feared her intellect more than her grief. He granted her one day before departure, believing that time constraint would limit damage. He underestimated deliberation. Medea secured asylum from Aeëtes of Athens during that window. She negotiated future protection in exchange for help with his infertility. She did not react blindly. She established exit before action. By the time the gifts reached the palace, Medea had already prepared her next location. The burning of Glauce and Creon was not an isolated act of revenge. It was phase 1 of dismantling Jason's ascent. The remaining obstacle was structural. As long as Jason possessed sons, he retained leverage. Medea evaluated that fact without illusion. In a society where legacy defined worth, the final strike would not target flesh alone. It would target inheritance. Medea stands at the center of a structure that has already decided her role. Corinth sees her as useful until she becomes inconvenient. Jason sees her as essential until he becomes ambitious. Creon sees her as dangerous the moment she stands outside male supervision. She evaluates the system clearly. In Corinth, a woman secures status through marriage. A foreign woman secures survival through obedience. A wife who resists both becomes a threat. Jason believes he has chosen rationally. He speaks of stability. He speaks of advancement. He speaks as though betrayal can be neutral if it is politically efficient. He reduces oath to negotiation. Medea does not answer with persuasion. She answers with counter-design. She sends the robe and crown. The palace burns. Creon dies with his daughter. The alliance Jason sought collapses before it begins. But one pillar remains intact. His sons still connect him to legitimacy. As long as they live, Jason can recover. He can remarry again. He can father heirs again. He can reattach himself to power. Medea understands succession as structure, not sentiment. In Euripides' version, the choice becomes explicit. She decides that Jason will not rebuild through the children she bore him. She decides that the line ends with her action. The act itself transforms her into the figure Greece fears most, a mother who refuses the boundary assigned to her. Whether interpreted as vengeance, logic, or tragic extremity, the result is the same. Jason loses not only family, but futurity. Game rule. In a patriarchal order, a man survives scandal, he does not survive extinction. When Medea departs in the chariot of Helios, she does not look back for forgiveness. She leaves Jason alive, but stripped of legacy. Corinth retains its walls. Greece retains its laws. Jason retains nothing that extends beyond his own lifetime. The system continues. His name does not. Athens receives her differently. Aeëtes does not see a monster descending from the sky. He sees opportunity. He has no heir, and infertility threatens his throne more than scandal threatens his reputation. Medea offers remedy through pharmakeia. In exchange, he offers sanctuary, game rule. A ruler without succession negotiates with whoever can restore it. Medea enters Athens not as supplicant, but as contractor. She secures protection before vulnerability. She bears Aeëtes, a son Medus, and for a moment the structure stabilizes. She is no longer merely exile. She is mother of a potential dynasty. Then Theseus returns. He arrives as the lost son of Aeëtes, carrying the sword and sandals that confirm lineage. His presence fractures Medea's position instantly. If Theseus is acknowledged, Medus becomes secondary. In a court built on inheritance, secondary is expendable. Medea reacts within the logic she has always used. She advises Aeëtes to test the newcomer by sending him against the Marathonian bull. The trial echoes Colchis. Survival determines legitimacy. Theseus succeeds. The threat remains. Medea prepares poison at a banquet intending to remove Theseus quietly. She does not intend spectacle. She intends continuity for her own son. At the final moment, Aeëtes recognizes the sword. He strikes the cup from Theseus's hand. The poison spills. Recognition overrides suspicion. Medea loses the position she had rebuilt. Athens cannot house both the restored heir and the foreign strategist who tried to erase him. She departs again, this time without dragons and without ceremony. The pattern sharpens. In every city, Medea enables succession, or threatens it. In every city, she becomes intolerable once male lineage stabilizes without her. Her story does not settle into resolution. It fractures into versions. And in those versions, the question shifts from what she did to who is allowed to define it. After Athens, the record disperses. Some traditions link Medea to the Medes, suggesting that her son Metis became ancestor to a people beyond Greece. Her story extends eastward away from the cities that condemned her. Other accounts allow her to fade into obscurity. Her later years unrecorded, her death unremarked. The silence is not accidental. It reflects discomfort. What remains active is the narrative frame imposed upon her. In early epic, she is indispensable to Jason's survival. In Euripides, she becomes the architect of filicide, the embodiment of extremity. Later retellings harden that image into archetype: the foreign sorceress, the destructive woman, the mother who violates nature. Yet even within ancient sources, disagreement persists. Some versions claim that the Corinthians killed her children and shifted blame onto her. Others describe accidental death during attempts at immortalization. Modern reinterpretations, such as Krista Wolf's novel, recast Medea as healer and scapegoat, suggesting that the myth of the murderous mother functioned as political propaganda to suppress an outsider. Game rule: control the story, and you control the verdict. Medea becomes more than character. She becomes contested territory. Each era selects the version that reinforces its anxieties. For a patriarchal order, she represents the fear of female agency, unregulated by male authority. For nationalist narratives, she embodies the danger of the foreign intellect within the state. Her pharmakeia transforms from skill into stigma. Her planning becomes pathology. Her refusal to accept betrayal becomes monstrosity. The question shifts. Did Medea destroy order, or did order require her to be monstrous in order to justify its own violence? Legacy does not preserve neutrally, it edits. Medea survives, not because she was celebrated, but because she was argued over. And in that argument, power continues to reveal itself. Medea's legacy does not travel in a straight line. It mutates. In Apollonius's Argonautica, she is the necessary intelligence behind Jason's triumph. Without her, the Golden Fleece remains in Colchis, and Jason remains an ambition without achievement. In Euripides, she becomes the woman who chooses annihilation over submission, forcing the audience to confront a decision that violates every social boundary assigned to motherhood. Later writers amplify the horror and reduce the context. Each retelling shifts emphasis. The healer becomes the poisoner. The strategist becomes the hysteric. The foreign priestess becomes the symbol of disorder within the polis. Modern reinterpretations reopen the file. Krista Wolf reframes Medea as scapegoat, arguing that political authority required a monstrous narrative to consolidate itself. Pier Paolo Pasolini presents her as embodiment of a sacred world displaced by rational utilitarian Greece. Contemporary theater and television oscillate between condemnation and reclamation, treating her as trauma, as power, or as warning. Game rule. When a woman refuses the script written for her, the system rewrites her. The so-called Medea effect emerges from this tension. She exists in the liminal space between victim and aggressor, between sacred and profane, between loyalty and destruction. That ambiguity unsettles. A male hero may justify violence as destiny. A woman who plans violence becomes aberration. She did not ask permission to betray her father for love. She did not ask permission to dismantle a king through deception. She did not ask permission to retaliate when oath became strategy. She planned and she executed. The question that remains is not whether Medea was innocent. The question is why her agency becomes intolerable once it threatens male continuity. You can read her through Euripides, where she acts and bears the moral weight. You can read her through Revision, where the state invents her crime. The choice reveals what you believe about power narrative and who is allowed to define justice. Medea endures because she exposes a fault line in the architecture of power. In a world where men wage war, seize thrones, abandon alliances, and justify each act as necessity, Medea applies the same logic and is branded unnatural. Jason reframes betrayal as diplomacy. Kings disguise fear as law. Poets convert political anxiety into moral caution. Medea refuses disguise. Game rule: violence committed to expand male power is called strategy. Violence committed to reclaim female autonomy is called monstrosity. Her story forces a structural question. If oath binds before gods, what happens when oath is broken for advantage? If lineage defines value, what becomes of the woman who can terminate lineage? If foreign knowledge sustains victory, why is that knowledge condemned once stability returns? Medea does not fit the categories offered to her. She is not purely victim because she chooses. She is not purely villain because every action responds to prior breach. She operates in the threshold space that systems struggle to regulate. Legacy transforms her into warning because warning is safer than analysis. A monstrous mother reinforces obedience. A calculating foreigner reinforces suspicion. A silenced healer reinforces hierarchy. Yet the earlier record remains. Jason required her. Aeëtes required her. Kings feared her because she understood the mechanics beneath ceremony. Power is rarely threatened by emotion. Power is threatened by competence without permission. Medea survives in literature because she refuses to dissolve into morality play. She resists simplification. Each era returns to her when it confronts the question of who controls narrative authority. Her name persists not as comfort but as disruption, and that may be the most enduring form of power she ever wielded. Medea's story does not ask for admiration, it demands accounting. Strip away the mythic surface, and a pattern remains. A woman provides the decisive intelligence behind a celebrated conquest. A man absorbs the glory. The alliance fractures when ambition seeks higher legitimacy. The woman who once enabled power becomes threat to power. Her removal is justified as protection of order. Game rule systems reward usefulness. Systems punish independence. If you read her through Euripides, Medea becomes the agent of irreversible destruction, a figure who accepts moral exile to enforce the cost of broken vows. If you read her through revisionist lenses, she becomes casualty of political narrative, her most infamous crime constructed to neutralize an outsider. Both readings expose something larger than character. They expose anxiety about female agency operating without male supervision. They expose fear of foreign knowledge embedded inside domestic space. They expose how easily legacy can be edited to stabilize authority. Medea does not fit comfortably into hero or monster. She is a strategist in a world that celebrates strategy only when performed by men. She is loyal beyond measure until loyalty is exploited. She responds to betrayal not with silence, but with structure. The final question is not whether she crossed a line. The final question is who drew that line, and who benefits from its enforcement. History remembers Jason as hero. It remembers Medea as warning. The distance between those two memories is where power speaks most clearly. Decide which version you accept, and you reveal which system you trust to define justice. Then the record closes, but the argument does not. Medea stands at the edge of myth and history as a stress test for memory itself. In one tradition, she is indispensable to heroic glory. In another, she is the mother who annihilates her own blood. In modern retellings, she becomes exile, healer, scapegoat, anthropological fracture between sacred and rational worlds. None of these versions erase the others. They layer. Game rule. The one who controls the narrative controls the moral. Medea threatens not because she uses power, but because she understands it. She recognizes that oaths structure societies. She recognizes that lineage secures men. She recognizes that spectacle persuades crowds. When she acts, she does so with awareness of consequence. She does not collapse into madness. She calculates. That calculation unsettles audiences across centuries. It destabilizes the comfort of assigning violence to destiny or temperament. It suggests that destruction can emerge from logic as easily as from rage. Her legacy survives because it cannot be contained inside a single verdict. She is argument embodied. If you accept Euripides' Medea, then you confront a woman who chooses devastation over erasure and forces you to measure justice against extremity. If you accept the revisionist Medea, then you confront a state capable of manufacturing monstrosity to suppress the foreign and the female. Either way, the myth exposes the machinery beneath reputation. Medea does not disappear. She persists wherever loyalty is exploited, wherever foreign knowledge is feared, wherever women who plan are called dangerous. The story ends. The question remains. Who decides which acts are strategy and which acts are unforgivable? Your answer reveals more about your system than about her.